What's up everyone, my name is Matthew and welcome to the very first episode of this new series I'm doing called 4 Pillars of Wellness. So just in case you missed last week's video, pretty much a recap on what this series is each week I'm going to be talking about a different pillar of wellness. So there's body, heart, mind, and spirit. And throughout the different weeks I'll be alternating between these different topics so that every month you have pretty much a wide view of wellness from these different pillars. So for this first week's episode I'm going to be focusing on a subtopic of body. And kind of what body entails is stuff like nutrition, exercise, sleep, the environment you're in, anything that pretty much affects your body in a way that by tandem affects your sense of wellness. So for this episode specifically, I'm going to be talking about nutrition and a few foods that you should avoid and cut out from your diet if you can to promote a better sense of well-being. And I've actually done a video on a few foods that you should incorporate into your diet to promote neurogenesis and the sense of well-being. So I'll have that linked below in the description and up here somewhere in the video. But for this episode, I'm going to be talking about foods you need to avoid, or at least try to, because of their negative effects on mental health and physical health. The first kind of food you want to avoid is foods that are really high in saturated fats and trans fats. Now, there's a lot of good kind of fats that you should include in your diet. You know, stuff like monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, things like omega-3s that you get from fish and nuts. But the fats you want to avoid are saturated fats and trans fats. And the reason for this is that it's actually been shown that these kind of fats decrease the rate of neurogenesis in your hippocampus and by tandem directly impact your sense of wellness and well-being through this decrease of neurogenesis. And so what are a few foods that actually contain saturated fats and trans fats? The biggest one I'd actually say is butter. Butter contains a lot of saturated fat and it really just builds up. Butter is in a lot of different foods. So one thing I've actually been doing, probably the biggest change I've done in my diet in the last couple of years, is whenever I cook, transition from using butter to olive oil. Another kind of food that contains a lot of fat or saturated fats is things that are high in dairy. So things that are really, really cheesy. And another food that contains a lot of saturated fats are things like meats that have a lot of fat on it. So, you know, if you have a big steak with a lot of fat, you want to avoid at least the fat part of that because of the effects on mental and physical health. The second kind of food you want to avoid is food that causes inflammation. So this contains anything from fried foods to processed foods to foods with a lot of added sugars. Something I read recently that was kind of shocking is that 60% of all calories in the United States are consumed by foods that are ultra processed. So this, you know, includes stuff like added sugars, it includes stuff like trans fats actually, like which I just talked about. And so these are things you want to avoid and things that again decrease neurogenesis and thus your sense of well-being. So a few examples of foods that are highly processed or fall into this category that cause inflammation are things like chips, things like, you know, crackers, sodas, French fries, donuts, things that are pretty much highly processed, and a lot of things that are in bags or cans. These are generally not conducive to a good diet that promotes good brain health and good physical health. Now the third thing you want to avoid is actually high intake of alcohol. It's weird because the American culture really promotes this idea of binge drinking, where you work hard during the week and then you die during the weekend. And things like, you know, a glass of wine with dinner and stuff like that is totally fine. But what's been shown is that high intake of alcohol actually can decrease neurogenesis by up to 40%. And that's pretty much a 40% decrease in your sense of well-being, and your sense of being alive and living to your full potential. So just be aware of high intake of alcohol because of its negative effects on the body and on the mind. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm sorry if some of these foods or drinks I've talked about will be hard for you to avoid in your diet, but I'm just the messenger, and I hope that at least you become a little conscious of when you do consume these kinds of foods. And I'm not saying you have to avoid all these things all the time, but again, just simply be conscious of what you're putting into your body, because body is a major component of wellness at the end of the day. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, please leave a comment, and make sure to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with the content we're putting out here. So with that, I'll see you guys in next week's episode, which will be on heart. Until then.